Turbocharge your brain with today's special guest, ST Rappaport. Today's episode is brought to you by Pro Writing Aid. Every word I write needs to be perfect. One typo in an email and I get dozens of replies pointing it out and saying, thought you're an author. That's why I trust Pro Writing Aid. I have every plugin and feature they offer to check my blog posts and when I'm writing offline. No other tool even comes close. Score a lifetime license at servemaster.com/Pro Writing Aid.
Are you tired of dealing with your boss? Do you feel underpaid and underappreciated? If you want to make it online, fire your boss and start living your retirement dreams now, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Serve No Master Podcast, where you'll learn how to open new revenue streams and make money while you sleep. Presented live from a tropical island in the South Pacific by best-selling author Jonathan Green. Now, here's your host.
Now, this is a topic near and dear to my heart because a lot of people are looking for ways to be more efficient with their time and optimization. And there's a lot of people from my generation as the first generation to really have diagnoses of ADD. My age, it was ADD. The year behind me was something that was ADHD, and now ADD doesn't exist anymore. And I saw everyone who was 1 year younger than me, like at least one out of every three guys got diagnosed and put on medications like Adderall, which is just speed. And I was always surprised. I'm always surprised by that. And I wondered what would have happened if I got put on that, right? And you see this, and a lot of people say, oh, the right answer to brain optimization is chemical, right? It's an external thing, whether it's a pill or a nootropic. There's all these things coming in. So I'd love to know, as someone who's a brain coach and expert in this field, what kind of got you interested in this idea, and where did your journey to brain optimization or brain excellence begin?
Yeah, it actually started back when I was fifth grade, which, by the way, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you. But when I was in fifth grade, I was struggling with reading, and I was going to a lot of reading tutors. My parents were spending a lot of money, and it wasn't actually getting anywhere. That they were like, okay, it's time to do something else. So what I did was, instead of going to another reading tutor, they brought me to someone who was a brain coach, a Feuerstein mediator, somebody who understands the brain and the thinking skills. So instead of doing any of the brain, like the typical reading exercises that you do when you go to a reading tutor, we did brain exercises, right? Like working on how the brain thinks. And by doing nothing having to do with reading, but just how the brain thinks, then I was automatically able to improve my reading skills, other areas of school, etc., like improved. And then as I got an adult and I continued improving more of my thinking skills and I had more and more breakthroughs, I was like, oh my God, this is way too, just continue going more down the rabbit hole of.
It's very interesting. A lot of schools and a lot of parents, they don't know what to do. Parents are busy. Both parents work, and teachers have a large classroom. I've seen classrooms with one teacher, 40 kids, and they just can't do individualized attention. It's mathematically impossible. And so they're always taking shortcuts, and they often say, what's the shortest solution, right? Sorry, your kid's dumb, right? Your kid's never going to work out. Maybe they should do sports or pick up an instrument. Like, that's the kind of thing you hear a lot. And like, kids get put on different tracks, the advanced class, the regular class, the remedial class. And very little is ever thought, or very little is said that you can get better at learning. That's almost never said, right? That's a really rare thing. And we're taught, almost like the beginning of a Dungeons and Dragons game, that you're given like a set of attributes. This is how good looking you are. This is how smart you are. This is your level of charisma. And that's it. You can't change it. That's a lot of how most people believe. That's certainly what I believed until I was around 17. I didn't know you could get better at friendship or relationships. So there's a lot of areas where we have this assumption, oh, you're dumb, that's it, right? Or that you're stuck. So it's very interesting that you can't, even the idea that you can get better at learning, because usually the solution that you often hear is like brute force. Just study 8 hours when everyone else is doing 4. Like that's the answer for a lot of people. And obviously that you can only do so much when you only have so many hours in a day. So can you maybe talk about really the basic idea of what brain coaching is, or where it starts from, how someone can know, oh, I can get better at this? Because I bet there's a lot of people that don't know where they are on the brain optimization spectrum.
Yeah. So first off, before I get into that, I just want to share that Professor Van Feuerstein, the one that all the work that I do is based on, the one who identified the 28 cognitive functions that I'll share about in a moment, he actually started working with Holocaust children after the World War II, when people were like, okay, these kids are like, they have too much brain traumas, too much things happen to them, and they just wanted to give up on them. And he's like, no, the brain could actually change. He already believed in neuroplasticity when it wasn't a thing. Like only in the late 1900s, some people like the early 2000s, the people were like, oh, actually your brain could change and you could grow dendrites and you can become smarter. And now we're talking about being able to actually grow whole neurons. And once again, we're going through the process. People aren't believing it. They're like, okay, the brain could change and we can learn new things, but we can't actually grow whole neurons. So science always changes. And as we have like the ability to like discover more things, and always in the beginning, it's like hard for people to understand, like, I believe this my whole life, like who can't change this, right? Like just till recently, we didn't think that whole neurons could change, right? Can grow. So it's constantly, I don't know if it's really changing, but we're being able to discover and learn more things. So to us, it looks like it's changing, if that makes sense. But the way it works is thinking is not one big thing. Thinking is actually made up of 28 separate thinking skills, 28 cognitive functions. So if I use both words, you know what I'm talking about. Now, naturally, with there being 28, some of them are going to be stronger and some of them are going to be weaker. Now, those weaker ones are making it hard for you to do what you want to do. So it's not like there's this big, huge spectrum of all thinking and like some people are dumb and some people are smart. Within each one of the 28 cognitive functions, you personally have some that are stronger and some that are weaker, and you can always improve all of them.
Okay. Let's dive into that. Can you give me, let's just talk about one of the 28. What's one of the most common ones that people are bad at and don't realize and get called dumb when it's actually just one out of the 28? What's the one that kind of is the one that often gets most maybe misdiagnosed?
Yeah. So one, for example, is called cleared perception, or the opposite is blurred and sweeping perception. It's when there's so much information that the brain can't take the information in a clear and organized manner. So anything like overwhelm, anxiety, having too much of a task and you just procrastinate because you don't do it because there's just way too much information, right? So people then consider themselves lazy, or they can't study, or they can't do their activities in their business, and they can't start this new project they're learning or whatever it is because, or maybe they like taking a course and they can't actually implement because there's so much information coming on inside that they can't actually do it. So you can train your brain to see things in a clear way so that it comes in an organized manner. So to start getting better at it, there's two things I like to suggest. First one, it's very related to the five senses. So just like asking yourself, okay, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? Right? And then it organizes the information in a clear way. Another little bit more simpler question is simply to ask yourself, what is the starting point? What is the very first thing I need to do? Like we think about, we need to do this task and there's so many parts to it and I'm just not going to do it. No, just open up your laptop and open up to the correct screen. Like literally just start there and then you'll be able to continue moving forward. Now, obviously that's really basic and eventually you don't want your brain to just have to think like in just one moment. But once your clear perception is strong, then you can build your other functions.
So is this, some people can hold on to 5 thoughts at once and some people can hold on to 8. Like, I remember about 10 or 15 years ago, everyone was like, multitasking is the future. And then every study showed multitasking is terrible. It turns you from excellent at one thing to average at everything. And so that's why no one talks about it anymore. All this, it took about, it was so hot. And then all the studies came out. But the one thing I learned from that is that it's like, oh, people can think about 5 to 8 things at a time, but that's a pretty big difference, right? That's a 60% advantage for one people. Is that kind of what you mean? Is that some people can maybe hold whatever the number is and other people can hold a slightly larger number and that becomes the difference where it happens?
Yeah, so that's actually another one of the thinking skills, right? Remember there's 28. So another one is called considering 2 or more sources of information at once. Like some people literally can't remember more than one piece of information. And like I said, some people goes all the way up to 8. And there have been situations where it's more than that. Average will just be 5 to 8. But you can't, in order to be able to hold many pieces of information at a time, you first have to get the information coming in a clear way. So that would be clear perception versus someone else would be holding 1 or 2 more systems of information. Now, it's really good that you brought that up because what happens is this 2 people might be struggling with the same thing, right? But being able to hold 5 pieces of information at one time. And for one person, it's because they're weak in the cognitive function of clear perception. And for another person, they're weak in the cognitive function of holding 2 or more sources of information. So the same problem for different people is because of different thinking skills.
Is it possible to increase the number of things? Can someone train to go from taking to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5? Is it possible to increase that as a skill?
Yeah, 100%. You could even do it to yourself. Like someone who, if you're like really, just tell yourself, right? Let's say you're about to do something. Okay, so what are the next 5 things I'm going to do? Tell it to yourself and then just reminder, like see if you could do it without having to write it down or remember. Like sometimes when people like give us like a phone number or something and you're not putting it in our phone or whatever it is, like you have to write the things down. Train yourself to see if you can remember it. If you're going to the grocery store, instead of like, having to put it down on your shopping list, like in your phone, just like see, hey, I just need to get these 5 things. Can I remember next time? Can I do 6? Like as long as you're conscious of it and you do it, then you start it. I like whenever you're working on one of these thinking skills, you want to work on it not in a pressurizing way, in a place where you're like it actually matters. So you don't want to do it when you're working on a big business project. And right now, I'm going to try to work on my improving holding 5 things at once, because your brain has the pressure of having to do this business project, which is there's a lot relying on it, and having to remember the 5 things. If you're just going to the grocery store, you write it on your notes app just in case you forget, but you decide not to look at it and you decide to just like remember those 5 things. There's no pressure there, because worst case, you'll just go back to your phone.
So there's a lot of, in my experience, misdiagnosis. I was a tutor for a long time, and I worked with a boy who the school said, look, it was a school with no grades. And then they go, your grades are too low. You can't go to the next year. I was like, well, that's not fair. You can't say there's no grades and then say grades aren't good enough. And what I discovered was that he was probably one of the smartest people I've ever met. He was one of the most advanced natural code breakers I've ever seen. Any mathematical code, I couldn't flip to the book, back of the book fast enough to read the answer. I was like, guys. And then when he took the entrance exam, he got the highest score they'd ever seen. I said, yeah, you guys and this was a really, really fancy pants school. I'm talking all celebrities, crazy expensive. You have to be a very expensive school to do the no grades thing. And they completely missed it. And they had every advantage. It was a 1-to-6 or 1-to-8 ratio for teachers, really small. And they completely thought, they were like, look, they thought he might even be like special needs. And it was like, no, he was like a high level genius. He just was fidgety. So he had to always move. So he would always be playing the drums while doing lessons with me. I was living with 3 drummers at the time. I was like, this is not a problem for me. But the teachers were so focused on that, they were missing the fact that if he's tapping on the desk with drums, he gets every answer right. So it was like figuring that out is what they completely missed. And it might have just been luck that at the time I was living with drummers, so it didn't annoy me. But that's something that I always think about is like, it wasn't like they were completely wrong. He was really, really, really smart. And it was like, it changed his life. Like, a great moment in my life would help someone like that. But there's so much misdiagnosis. And now we're in a place where all the words have changed for what you're allowed to say for someone who has different issues. When I grew up, there was autism. Now it's called autism spectrum disease. It's changed. Asperger's doesn't exist anymore. And I know psychological, I guess the book is number 5, and the rules are constantly changing. It's such a moving target to even know where you are. How do you even know where you are on the spectrum? Is there a test someone can take to assess, to figure out where they actually are, to say, oh, I'm weak or strong in some areas?
Yeah. So there is an official assessment that I can do to do with people. I don't like doing it because it takes literally 20 hours of writing reports. So I almost never do it, but I do have a free assessment, which gives you a really good baseline. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but it'll give you a very, very good baseline where you go through each one of them and you'll mark 1 through 5. You could get that lifepicksuniversity.com/CF for cognitive functions. This lifepicks, university.com/CF. But to your point about the diagnosis things, that's why I'm really not a big fan of diagnosing. I mean, diagnosing obviously helps in many ways to be able to understand another person. So if this person has ADHD or if this person is on the autism spectrum, then it's easier to understand it. But as a person, if somebody is diagnosed with it, I don't like getting caught up in it, because then you're like, oh, so I have ADHD, so I can't do this or I can't do that, or this means that. We very much get caught in the box of what's possible, but you could literally change things in your brain. And I've literally had clients that got off Adderall because the way their brain changes now can focus. So they now didn't need it anymore.
Yeah. I'm very interested in that, because when I was around 30, I went to my doctor and I was like, hey, I think I have ADD. I was like, I have different thoughts all the time. I'm not focused like a lot of other people are. I was like, maybe I need to be on medicine. He's like, and I had a cool doctor. It was cool. He had a cool diagnosis at the time. He was like, yeah, but if it looks cool, do it. And he was like, well, how many of your ideas work? He said, are they dumb ideas or do they grow your business? I was like, oh, most of them turn out to be good ideas. He's like, yeah, why would you want to fix that? And I thought that was very interesting, because most people just say you have a lot of ideas. They don't think about, well, are they good or not? And it's not always having a lot of ideas isn't always bad. I definitely have areas where I'm really bad at focusing and have other areas where I can't. And I'm terrible at article writing, but I write books for a living, and they're very different. It's very hard for me to write short form, very easy to write long form. And it's hard to explain that logically. So there's a lot now in our culture. And it's like all these terms are so dangerous to talk about because you could hurt someone's feelings or offend if you use a wrong term. Like the terms I grew up with, you're not allowed to use anymore. A lot of times people don't know what they mean. And they've decided they're offensive. Like they're not, it's just a Latin word sometimes, but it's so dangerous. And everyone now it talks about neurodivergence and how it's like a good thing. And I think it's become really murky. That's the issue, is that like multiple diseases have all become autism, right? Whereas autism used to be 20 different things. And I think we've become less clear because we're not allowed to say exactly what's going on, because I think we're so worried about there being an attachment, a negative attachment to it, instead of saying, well, maybe it's fixable, right? Maybe it's not this, right? Maybe you just have to develop the skill. That's why this is very interesting, because it's something we're dealing with in my family, is that we've had some diagnoses and I'm like, I don't think that's right. And that's why this is interesting to me, is because it's often, there could be so many other things, right? Like a kid could be depressed, and that's why their performance in school is dropping. A kid could be having different issues, or they could be sick. And then we think it's one thing, it's always something different. Or it's even a kid in high school, like they got a crush on someone else. They're spending all day looking at the kid they like. They're not doing their homework. And you go, oh, your kid's turned dumb. It's like, wait. So this is interesting to me that there's a process for diagnosing and then a process for approaching. So is it too late for people who are older in life to do these things? And is focus one of them? Because focus is so hot right now. And there's a lot of crossover between bodybuilding and military and people in Silicon Valley doing all sorts of, from nootropics to narcotics, to try and become more optimized. Everyone's trying to create that limitless pill. And what I think about is I had a friend in college who had a test the next day, and he goes, I got to find an Adderall so I can study. And he was looking for an Adderall for 8 hours, and then he studied for 2 hours for the test. And I was like, I would never want to be chemical dependent on the ability to learn or the ability to work. But we've generated a massive number of people who have that. So we jump to this. But what are your thoughts on that? Because everyone has like the nootropics they swear by, and everyone's like, oh, that one doesn't work, this one works. And because it's in the supplement area, the studies and the research is obviously murky. So there's not a lot of double-blind studies and like really known data about most of the drugs and chemicals out there. And that's why I see it as like people, the same things to make like a fighter pilot more responsive. So I was like, oh, this will make me a better coder. So what are your thoughts on those? And should we try and get optimized without chemicals before we look at that stuff?
Yeah. Okay. So there's so much here. First, to answer your question about, is it ever too late? And the answer is absolutely no. Like I said, like now you can always, always, always train your brain. And even when people are already in their later stages, like have like Parkinson's and things, and their brain isn't working, by doing these things, I'm not saying it's going to stop their diseases, but it most definitely slows it down. So if you have a healthy brain, most definitely, like my mom, when I was a kid, she got trained in the method also. And she had someone that came to a 75-year-old lady who came to her because she was embarrassed to bring her daughter-in-law over to her house because her house was too messy. So at 75, she went to get her brain, improve her thinking skills, and improve her brain optimization, so that way she could keep her house organized. So just saying, it's never too late. That's first of all. Second of all, about focusing. So 100%, I think that a person should try to optimize their brain naturally before having to take their chemicals, so they don't become relying on the chemicals. And also many times they have side effects that like don't really suit well for people. I'm not like totally against it. There's like situations where it's better for people, but I don't think we should just jump to it right away. Now, focusing, actually, if any of your weak thinking skills are weak, then it might be hard for you to focus. But my absolute favorite way to help people improve focusing is this. The same part of your brain that is in charge of being able to choose to focus is also in charge of being able to touch, the sense of touch. Okay. Now, usually when we touch something, we see it before we actually touch it. So if I am going to touch my laptop, then I have touched my laptop in the past. I know what my laptop feels like. So when I see it, even before my hand gets to it, I am already feeling it in my mind. So my hand is almost like just a reinforcement of what it actually is. It's not actually fully using its sense of touch. Okay, so the same part of our brain that's in charge of choosing to focus as in charge of touch is not actually developed, because we are touching more with our eyes than we are actually touching with our hands. So by improving your sense of touch, you are automatically going to improve your sense of focus. So how do you do this? You take away your ability to see. What we do is we put on blindfolds and we do things blindfolded. So whether that's games, whether that's Braille books, personally, like I have like special, like whole program that I do just for this, but it's like Braille, it looks like Braille, but it's not actually Braille, like where you feel it, the things, anything where you could just take random items in your house, put it in a non-see-through bag and feel them, feel all the details. Here's where it's important. Don't just say, oh, like this is like a blanket, like actually feel the details of it without being able to see it. And then you are going to be developing the part of your brain that is in charge of that is in charge of touching, and you'll automatically improve your ability. You're going to actually feel it in your brain because you don't use that part of your brain so often. So it becomes scary, but you begin to improve your ability to focus.
Do you think that the shift in how we work, we've moved from paperwork to computers? Like when I work, if I'm at my desk, I don't touch anything. I just touch the keyboard, which is the same no matter what I'm working on, keyboard and mouse, right? I'm not touching anything, right? I'm just sitting in my chair. I don't have to touch the desk, right? Because it's all automated. And we've had a massive shift to everyone working from home. And everyone knows that when employees work from home, performance goes down, right? Because no one's watching. And I've always thought that it's very dangerous if your work and your entertainment are the same place. If you watch Netflix and do your work on the same laptop, it merges these two thoughts, kind of like, oh, don't do things in bed other than sleep, because that's why people have bad sleep. Do you think that this problem it's growing because we do less touch? And also our first jump is a chemical solution, or our first jump is to assume it's something wrong, and we're doing less and less touch. Like all of these kids weren't able to go to school for 2 years. They didn't touch anything. And I'm really big on touch. I know that there's a lot of studies about gentle human touch, that if a baby's not touched for 6 months, it dies. Like you can give food, everything else, with no touch, babies die. And I've studied that. I've always been very interested in that, how important touch is as part of communication, that we've created these bigger and bigger barriers. You think it's going to get worse right now because we've created distances and a lot of people spent 2 years not seeing any facial expressions.
Yeah, I think there's different things there. I think the focusing thing actually started before COVID. People that worked at home that don't especially have the ability, don't struggle with focusing, actually were able to focus better at home because they didn't have the distractions of coworkers and things like that. And they're just like able to sit down and get work done. But people who need that person there, right, like then they had a much harder time with being able to focus. So I don't know if it's especially like at home or not at home. I think it's more to your point of what you said about we jump to conclusions. I think we're very fast to put on band-aids, not just with focusing, but in general, our society of life very much is, okay, what's the surface problem here? We're going to solve that surface problem. We're going to put on a band-aid without actually seeing what is causing that issue. Like you said earlier, right? Like if someone's at school, they might have depression. They might be looking at someone that they're interested in, right? And instead we're like, no, surface issue. They're not doing well in school. Bye. So I think that we need to be able to take a moment when any area of your life, like even in relationships, right? We say, hey, like, okay, whatever, I'm just going to figure this out. But what caused that? Like, why did you actually get into that argument to start off with?
So what about, we're seeing a lot of older people in the West have cognitive issues. There's been a bunch of studies that show in China and Eastern countries, older people have more agile minds, and a lot of it is culture. Like the elderly are revered in China and Japan and the West. And in America, we're like, get out of the way, get into a home. Like we're putting our parents into homes earlier and earlier and earlier. I'm only in my 40s. I know my kids are already thinking about it. And it's this thing, right? And Alzheimer's is more, everyone knows someone who's had Alzheimer's. Can these type of exercises help someone in a preventative state or early on, like in the earlier phases of Alzheimer's or with these earlier cognitive distant kind of things? And do you think part of it, because we expect to lose our faculties when we're older, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy? I know it's a big loaded question.
Yeah. To answer your second question first, I am a very big believer in that of we self-fulfill whatever we think and whatever we believe. So yes, first of all, if you could now listen to this and understand that your brain could actually grow and you could grow new neurons and your brain could actually become smarter as you could go older, then you'll start fulfilling that. Instead of your brain going down, it will start going up. That's first of all. Second of all, 100% improving your cognitive functions will most definitely prevent and slow down Alzheimer's. So if a person already has Alzheimer's or any sort of those other diseases, it's not going to stop it completely. Unfortunately, we don't have anything at the moment that will completely stop something, but it's a massive preventer, a massive slowdown. It will slow down a massive deal, and the rest, like those years of living, would be much higher quality.
Yeah, because one of the things that makes it hard is because we've created spectrums. Like Alzheimer's, there's a wide spectrum. It can be I'm forgetful, I lose my passwords, all the way to I don't know who anyone is. And I've had members of my family across the whole spectrum. And we more and more we just create these wide ranges, and the people are at such different stages that it's, again, hard to even know, because it sounds like really major, right? Like there's cancer, but there's really different kinds of cancer, right? There's cancer that's survivable, cancer that's not survivable. It's all given the same name. And I think sometimes our desire to make knowing things easier, we've actually made it more difficult to be specific. So, because we don't hear about different types of Alzheimer's or different types of diseases when there really is a spectrum. So when someone is thinking about, okay, this is interesting to me, I want to see where I'm at. Is this something that people can improve these skills on their own? Like, is this something where someone can read a book, do exercises and improve? Or it's like, no, you need someone in the room, you need a coaching element to it because it requires an external input to have really good success?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and there's no right or wrong. There's two parts to it, because there are some things that you know naturally you are good at. You know if you're good at time, or you're not, or you're like always late. If you're like you procrastinate or not, right? That's why like the self-evaluation that I said before, lifepeaksuniversity.com/CF, is a really good place, because you could start there, and it's going to be based on what you know already. Then you could, yes, read books, you can do exercises, and you can improve that on your own. But there are certain things that, because you've been doing it your whole life, you don't think there is a problem with doing it. I'll give you a personal example, okay? For the longest time, I was a planner. I would plan my day every single day the night before, ever since I was in high school, okay? And in many ways, that was really good. I would plan the night before, I would get things done. Everything that needed to happen would happen now. Something needed to, like literally, I didn't procrastinate, everything got done. Now, the problem with that was I was so much trying to get everything done now that I couldn't think ahead. I couldn't think 6 months ahead. I couldn't think a year ahead. And I just thought, whatever, it's fine. I'm getting things done. I'm being productive. So who actually cares? But that was stopping me from being able to grow the business, being able to save 10 plus hours every single week, whole bunch of other things. When I improve the cognitive function by having an outside person help me improve my cognitive function of categorizations, then I was able to do all those other things. But I would have never been able to do by myself, because I thought already I know how to categorize red, blue, yellow, green. That I could do. But being able to categorize for 6 months, a year, 18 months, and seeing what's going to happen now, what's going to happen later, that was a little bit more challenging. So it's yes and no.
Okay. Because there's some people just don't have the financial resources for a coach, or they're early on and they're like, well, I don't want to, because some people are like, oh, you got to go straight to a coach, right? And it's like, I don't know where I'm at, and it can be quite prohibitive, and there's not a lot of people in the field. So it's good to know that you can start out with smaller things and build up to it to kind of work on it. How early, like you talked about starting quite young, how early can you start doing exercises and things with children to assess them and to see and to kind of help them develop or improve some of these skills?
Yeah, starting from the age of 3 usually. So young, 3 years old, it works. Well, obviously, it's going to be different things. You're not going to do the same things as you would when you're working with a 45-year-old, but yeah.
Okay. And are there certain types of activities? We're always trying different things. I have 4 kids. We're trying everything to give them every tools from Montessori, play a Montessori toy, not this toy, play board games. Or like right now, to get my kids to read more, I've got them all reading Choose Your Own Adventure books, because now they can kind of interact with the book. And that's how I learned to read. Like, it got me excited because I could affect the book. And my mom figured that out, and it really worked on me. So now we're trying with my kids. So parents are always like, every toy, every resource, whatever it takes. And the area of learning education is so profitable. Let's be honest, it's a huge money industry that there's stuff in there that works, and there's stuff in there with no science behind it, right? Like Hooked on Phonics was huge for years. Why did it disappear? Well, because then it's the same as learning to read the regular way, right? So there's a lot of these things that kind of come and go really quickly. So what are things that are good for parents to try with their kids, and what are things that are kind of like, there's not really proof that they work?
Yeah. So the best thing you could do for a child is you could mediate them. That means instead of ever telling them what to do, ask them questions to help them come to the conclusion by themselves. I know it takes a lot of time and I know it's a lot of effort. But even if you could do it for 10 minutes every day when they come to ask you for a question, when you're trying to help them get ready for school, whatever it is, when you're asking them questions, you're taking their mind from a passive to an active, and you're actually developing their thinking skills.
Okay. Well, this has been all very interesting. I appreciate you giving me so much of your time. I know you have a couple of different websites and presence online. Where's the best place where people want to learn more from you to go and visit you to learn about brain training, to figure out brain optimization, to figure out where they are on the spectrum, and to see, even to start with that self-assessment you talked about?
Yeah, so the best place you could actually learn more about this and get a lot of more tips that you could be doing by yourself to improve your cognitive functions is on the Life Picks University podcast. So that's Life Picks, P-I-X University. And the assessment is lifepicksuniversity.com/CF for cognitive functions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for spending us time. We'll make sure to put the links in the show notes and below the video for everyone who's watching. I really appreciate you giving me so much time. Thank you for being here today, ST.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here with you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Starting your blog is an amazing step. Now it's time to get your first 100 raving fans as quickly as possible. Let me show you the shortcut to this milestone with my free guide at servemaster.com/100. That's /100.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Serve No Master podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back next week with more tips and tactics on how to escape the rat race. Please take a moment to leave a review at servenomaster.com/iTunes. It helps the show grow, and more listeners means more content for you. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.